Sicil stepped into the dimly lit room, her chest tightening at the sight of Ethan sprawled on the bed. He looked utterly broken, a version of him she'd never seen before. The air smelled faintly of alcohol, and an empty glass sat abandoned on the floor. Her heart ached, the weight of their unspoken pain hanging heavy in the silence. She walked over quietly, kneeling beside him, and reached out to gently place her hand on his head. Her touch was tender, hesitant. "Hey," she whispered, her voice soft but laced with concern. "Are you okay?" Ethan stirred, his bleary eyes fluttering open to meet hers. A bitter smile tugged at his lips, and for a moment it seemed like he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Sicil," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "You shouldn't be here." "I wanted to check on you," she said, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "You didn't look okay yesterday." "I'm fine," he replied, though his words slurred slightly. His hand found its way to her cheek, his touch warm but trembling. "Or maybe I'm not. I don't even know anymore." His eyes searched hers, his expression raw, like he was unraveling in front of her. "But I know one thing. You're the love of my life, and I'm a selfish man, Sicil. I want all of you, every piece of you. I can't share you. Not with him." Sicil felt her breath hitch, her heart twisting painfully in her chest. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You know how much I care about you. I love you, I really do. That's never changed, but it's not enough." Ethan cut in, his voice rising, his words bitter. He sat up, leaning toward her, his gaze burning into hers. "I've known it for a while. I can see it in your eyes when you talk about him. I can feel it in the way you pull away from me without even realizing it." His voice cracked, and he looked away, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Do you know how much it hurts to see you slipping away piece by piece? And to him of all people, I hate him, Sicil. I hate Sebastian for taking you from me." The rawness of his confession struck her like a blow, leaving her momentarily speechless. She swallowed hard, tears pooling in her eyes. "Ethan," she began, her voice trembling, "this isn't fair. To you, to me, or to him. I didn't ask for this to happen. I didn't want to hurt you." "But you have," he said, his tone softer now, though no less pained. "You've ripped me apart. And the worst part is I can't even blame you because I know you love me too, just not in the way I need you to." She shook her head, biting her lip to keep the tears from falling. "I hate that I've hurt you. I wish I could make it all better, but I don't know how." Ethan laughed bitterly, the sound sharp and hollow. You can't fix this, Sicil, not unless you choose me." Her silence was deafening, and in that moment the truth hung heavy between them. She couldn't give him what he wanted. Blinking back her tears, she reached for the glass of water on the table, pressing it gently into his hands. "Here," she said quietly, "you need this." He stared at her for a long moment before taking a sip, his shoulders slumping as if all the fight had drained out of him. "You should go," he said, his voice barely audible. "I'll stay until you fall asleep," she offered, her tone soft but firm. He didn't argue, lying back down on the couch, his face turned away from her. She sat there until his breathing evened out, her heart breaking for the man she couldn't save. When she finally stepped out of the room, she found Sebastian and Tia waiting in the living room. They both stood as soon as they saw her, their expressions a mix of worry and anticipation. Sebastian's eyes locked onto hers, his voice careful, almost tentative. "Is he okay?" Sicil nodded, though the weight of everything that had just happened felt unbearable. "He's asleep now," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She glanced back at the closed door, a knot forming in her stomach. "But he's not okay." "None of this is okay." Her voice cracked, and she wrapped her arms around herself, as though trying to hold herself together. Sebastian stepped closer, his hand reaching out to rest lightly on her arm. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice steady but filled with sincerity. "For what you're going through, for what he's going through. This isn't easy for anyone." She nodded, tears finally spilling over as she leaned into his touch, her emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "I don't know how to fix this," she admitted, her voice breaking. Sebastian didn't have an answer, but he didn't let go. He simply held her, letting her fall apart in his arms, as the weight of love and loss pressed down on them both. Tia gently took Sicil's hand in her own, her eyes searching Sicil's for answers. "Sicil," she began softly, her voice tinged with worry. "Please help me understand what's going on with Ethan. He's hurting, and I don't know how to help him." Sicil hesitated, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She glanced toward the room where Ethan was resting, knowing this wasn't a story she could share lightly, or without his consent. After a moment, she gave Tia a small, reassuring nod. "I'll tell you everything," she said carefully, her voice steady but low. "But not now. Let's wait until Ethan wakes up. Call me when he's ready to talk, and we'll have this conversation." Tia's lips pressed into a thin line as she studied Sicil's face, her concern for her brother evident. Reluctantly, she nodded. "All right," she said, her tone laced with resignation. Yet something in her expression remained unsettled. Her gaze flickered briefly to the tall man standing quietly by Sicil's side, Sebastian. There was something about him, something unspoken yet undeniable, that made Tia's heart clench with suspicion. Though she didn't know the details, she couldn't shake the feeling that he played a role in the heartbreak Ethan was enduring. But this wasn't the time to press for answers. For now, she swallowed her unease, forcing herself to offer a polite farewell. "See you later, Sicil," Tia said, her voice heavy with unspoken questions. Her heart ached as she watched Sicil and Sebastian leave, the unanswered tension lingering like a shadow in the air. As Sebastian and Sicil stepped into Sebastian's home, they were greeted by the warm, comforting aroma of a home-cooked meal wafting through the air. The familiar scene of their family, Jane, Jenny, Arthur, and Albert, gathered around the dining table filled the room with a cozy sense of belonging. However, the unexpected return of Sebastian and Sicil quickly shifted the atmosphere. Surprise flickered across their parents' faces, curiosity written in their raised eyebrows and questioning smiles. "Back so soon?" Jane asked, her voice tinged with both concern and intrigue. Sebastian took the lead, offering a reassuring smile. "We decided to cut our trip short. One of Sicil's friends isn't feeling well and we thought it best to return and check on things." Arthur nodded in understanding, while Jenny murmured a sympathetic, "That's thoughtful of you." Albert, however, remained more observant than vocal. His brows furrowed slightly as he processed the news, his gaze lingering on both Sebastian and Sicil. Without a word, he rose from his seat, his demeanor calm yet serious, and gestured toward the study. "Let's talk privately," Albert said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Once inside the study, the shift in Albert's tone became more evident. His eyes, sharp yet laced with a fatherly concern, fixed on the young couple. "I couldn't help but notice your sudden return," he began, his words measured. "Is there something you're not telling us?" Sebastian and Sicil exchanged a look, silently agreeing on the need for transparency. Sebastian spoke first, his tone steady. "We didn't want to bring this up at the table, but Ethan's been struggling. He's not doing well, and we felt it was important to be there for him," Sicil added softly, her voice filled with sincerity. "He's important, and we couldn't just stay away knowing he needed support." Albert listened carefully, his expression softening slightly, though a shadow of concern lingered. While he never openly admitted it, Albert had always respected Ethan. He saw Ethan as a good man, perhaps not ideal for his daughter, but someone who treated Sicil with love and respect. Ethan's heartbreak, in Albert's eyes, was undeserved. After a moment of silence, Albert sighed, his stern exterior giving way to a more compassionate tone. "I understand," he said, though there was a hint of reluctance in his voice. "It's admirable to care for a friend in need. But," his gaze sharpened as he looked between the two, "family must always come first. And by family I mean the two of you. Your relationship is the foundation of the family you're building together." Sebastian and Sicil listened intently, the weight of Albert's words settling heavily upon them. "While friendships are important," Albert continued, his voice firm but kind, "you've been given a second chance after years apart. Don't let anything distract you from rediscovering and cherishing what you have with each other. Love like this is rare. Protect it." Sebastian and Sicil could not ignore Albert's emphasis on the word friend for Ethan, but they nodded. Sebastian's expression was thoughtful when he replied, "We understand, and we'll keep that in mind." Sicil offered a small, grateful smile. "Thank you, Dad. Your words mean a lot." Albert's gaze softened further, and he gave a slight nod. "Good. Now go join the others. Lunch is getting cold, and I'm sure they're wondering what's taking so long."